Welcome back to Cable Family Farm. I'm Caden.
And I'm Patrick, and today we're going to take you through exactly how much it costs us to start our pastured broiler operation. So whether you're new to farming and you're looking for a way in, if you are looking to add an enterprise to your farm, or if you have a homestead and you're looking to raise some birds for just your family, we're going to take you through the numbers, discuss it, and see if it might be something that makes sense for you. So let's get into it.
Let's do it. We're going to go step by step through the different costs associated with raising broilers on pasture. The first one we're going to talk about, and one of the most fundamental, is land. So you got to have land if you want to do pretty much any type of farming. For most people, land can be the most costly and the biggest barrier to entry to starting a farming enterprise. But it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to go out and buy land. There are ways that we're going to get into that you can mitigate that cost and start farming on a budget.
Right, so in our first year, just to give you a real life example, we're fortunate enough to have some family land that was available for the cost of some groceries that we were producing. And we were able to use about 2.5 acres of an old horse pasture for our first year of broiler production. It wasn't the most ideal setup because there were trees in the pasture. The corners were pretty harsh, which made it tough to move tractors and turn around sometimes. And not all the land was suitable. You know, some of it was really steep and we couldn't even run the tractors over it. But in your first year, you take what you can get and you work with it. And now going into our second year, we've actually come across another opportunity.
Yeah, we got a opportunity came up that allowed us to lease some pasture land down the road from where our main farm is. If you haven't already seen our last video, the pastures on this land were really overgrown and they were starting to get, taken over by trees and whatnot. We had to clear that land, prep it for, raising birds on it this year.
So it can take a lot of work. If you decide to lease some land and make a deal with somebody, you might have to put in a lot of work to that land that you might not see the rewards of in 10 years. But you'll be able to run your animals that year, and that's what matters. The reason leasing land makes so much sense for a small-scale farm is that you're not going to continuously have to shell out a bunch of money to pay off the land that you decided to buy. You're not taking on any debt or any type of risk. You're simply farming on this land that this person has allowed you to farm on.
A lot of people are intimidated by the idea of leasing land, but it's very doable, especially with the type of farming that we're doing, using regenerative practices, building soil, promoting biodiversity, creating an ecosystem, and fertilizing the ground. The landowner has a lot of reasons why they would want you on their land. In a lot of situations, you can find the opportunity to lease land for very little or just in exchange for products you produce on your farm.
How many acres you might need is going to depend on a few factors that you're going to have to figure out. How big is your chicken operation going to be? If you're on a homestead and you have 50 chickens, you won't even need an acre of land. You might need a quarter acre or a half acre. If you're doing a bigger operation, something like what we did, we were on 2.5 acres and we did 1,800 birds. But you have to be thinking, how many do you have time to raise? How many do you have time to process, which is a huge one? And how many can you sell? So do you have a good way to sell those birds? Are you going to be prepared for that?
That's probably the most important thing, because you can be able to, process this many birds and raise this many birds, but if you can't sell them,
right,
it doesn't matter.
So with our system using Joel Salatin chicken tractors and moving them once a day, by our math, we figured out that you can run about 660 birds per acre. And that's moving them across the pasture once every year and not touching anything twice.
So once you've figured out your land situation and know where you're going to be raising your chickens, one of the next steps is going to be having a brooder in place to raise your chicks for the first 3 weeks or so until they go out onto pasture.
With the brooder, we decided to go with a very cheap, minimal brooder for our first year. We didn't see any reason to spend a bunch of money when we hadn't even started making any yet. So what we did was we bought cheap Tractor Supply heat lamps, we bought some hoses, we bought some broiler drinkers, and we threw it together with some old used plywood and some rubber horse mats to line the floor. So we tried not to invest in anything that wouldn't be usable in the coming years. So the stuff that we did buy new, we knew would have a purpose on the farm, so we felt good about all those decisions. The brooder that we built, that was $300, it could hold about 300 birds at a time. And so if you're going to be raising less at a time or have smaller batches, that number could be cut in half, and it could be a lot less costly. And that brooder worked just fine for all those birds. They were safe, they were healthy. We were able to control the temperature with a little heat gun that we had. There was nothing wrong with that. You can go minimal and still do extremely well. But this year, we did upgrade our brooder a bit. You tell them about that?
Right. So if you haven't already seen a previous video that we put out, we made 2 of the Joel Salatin style mini brooders. So they hold about, the ones we built, they hold about 300 chicks apiece, and that was right for us. But in that video, we break down the cost and kind of the build and how it went. The link's in the description, so go check that out if you want to learn more. So once your birds are big enough in the brooder, you're going to need a shelter of some kind to raise them on pasture. For us, we chose the Joel Salatin design chicken shelter. We felt like this was the best for our scenario because it was tried and true, and you're able to raise a lot more birds in one tractor than say like the Susevich style tractors, which only hold 30 birds. The Joel Salatin ones hold 75. So we went with those, and we built 4 of them.
The reason we went with 4 of them is because we were doing batches of 300 at a time. So 75 times 4 is 300. And we did 6 batches throughout the year to get to that 1,800 number that you would have seen in one of our previous videos. So this number can vary a lot depending on if you're going to do multiple batches or if you plan to do them all at one time. You may need more or may need less tractors, but know how many yours are going to hold and do your numbers based off of that. So our tractors cost about $450 each to build. So that is about $1,800 for our operation when we started. The other tractor designs may cost a little bit less. Some of the sturdier, heavier duty ones that might be harder to move could cost more, especially if you buy one that's pre-made. That's definitely going to cost more. So we recommend building it yourself. There's also other designs out there that can hold more chickens, but you may have to have a piece of equipment to move them, like a side-by-side or a tractor, and you've got to factor that in. We built our systems around moving everything by hand, so we would never need any equipment, and it would just be the cost of the tractor and the labor every day from us.
For those Joel Salatin design tractors, they use aluminum siding on the top and sides, and that's half of the cost of the build, but it's really important that you use that. If you try to use steel and try to make it less costly, it is going to be really heavy to move, and you're going to wish you would have used aluminum. So
it's also going to be a lot hotter, especially if you're in a warm climate. It's going to just cook your birds. So,
pro tip. Once your birds are fully grown and they're to your desired processing weight, you're going to need a way to transport them to get them processed. For us, we use poultry crates. This is kind of the industry standard. While you can get away with rigging something up to move birds short distances, it's a lot simpler and safer to purchase poultry crates, and they're not cheap, so you definitely need to factor that in if you're going to be starting a broiler operation. Poultry crates for us were about 80 bucks a piece, and they hold about 8 to 10 birds depending on the size. We move 1 tractor at a time, so we process 1 tractor at a time. So that's 75 birds, and we needed 8 poultry crates to move them. So that's a good chunk of change that you need to prepare for.
Yeah, it ended up being about $650 for us to have poultry crates, and that's, like you said, just to move 1 tractor.
You may not need to move that many at a time. Like, you may be really close to where you're going to be processing them, or you may be taking them to the processor and need to take all the birds at one time. And
then you may need a lot more crates.
Yeah, you can find them used, but they are kind of hard to come by. That is a possibility.
So now we're to processing time, and this is the most important thing in our opinion when it comes to cost, because there's so many different ways to go about it. Now, we chose a route of renting processing equipment from our local extension office. They have a trailer that has all the equipment in it, and you can rent it for, I believe, $75 a day.
For 3 days.
For 3 days, okay. And, that took care of how we had our birds set up to be processed. That took care of us for very cheaply. So that was incredible for our first year. It did take time to go pick that up and take it back.
A lot of time.
get it back on the trailer, have it all clean, get it back in time. That's a lot to do while you're worried about processing a lot of birds, but it was doable and it saved us a lot of money in our first year. We highly recommend renting the processing equipment from an extension office near you if you can, because it's great for that first year. But the problem is it doesn't allow you to set your own processing schedule. We processed 6 times and we were able to get the trailer for those time periods, but that's a risk that is unnecessary in future years when you have the money to reinvest.
We decided to purchase our own processing equipment this year. This ran us about $10,000 for a new scalder, plucker, and kill cones. If you're doing less birds, we'll be doing about 2,000 birds this year. But if you're doing less, you can get away with, a little bit cheaper equipment. But you can get more expensive equipment for sure if you're doing a larger scale.
Ours is also set up for turkeys as well. So
right, yeah. So we're going to be doing turkeys this year, and we wanted to make sure we had, the right equipment to do, both broilers and turkeys at a decent scale. Having this new equipment is going to free us up a lot. Renting that equipment from the extension office, you have like a 3-day window to get everything done. But having your own equipment, you're able to process birds throughout the week. And if you have other things going on, like we have a market garden and farmers markets to attend to, so we can work around our schedule and process birds at the right time, and take breaks in between. Before we were having to process days in a row, and now we can break it up a little bit, and it'll be a lot more enjoyable.
The other option that we haven't mentioned yet, but that is possible, is taking your birds to a USDA inspected facility to have them processed for you. We do not have much experience in this, as we decided from the beginning that we would process them ourselves because we wanted to be part of the full process and have everything on farm. But if you do decide this option, the only drawback is going to be the cost. For each bird, based on our research, you're going to be looking at roughly $4 to $7, $8 per bird to have them processed for you. And it's going to be different based on if you have them cut up, if you have them vacuum sealed, stuff like that. So that is a huge factor that would be part of your cost if you decide not to process. Now that would save you a lot of time and work, but you'll lose some of that profit. So just keep that in mind.
Outsourcing your processing can be a very valid option though. Half of the labor that goes into raising birds on pasture for meat is in the processing. So if you take that out of the equation, you can raise a lot more birds, and even if you don't make as much money per bird, you can raise more. And if that's something that you'd rather do, it's a valid option.
Or if you don't have the help, or you don't want to start paying employees and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
So if you are processing your own birds, you're going to have some choices when it comes to packing them. You can do the heat shrink wrap option, or you can vacuum seal them. So we started last year with the heat shrink bags. We used a turkey pot. You dip your bags in with a straw in it. It draws the air out. You zip tie it, and that worked fine for us for the first couple months. But then we realized there was a better option that we could vacuum seal. The heat shrink bags, they're not completely airtight. If you put it in your fridge and it starts to thaw out, it can leak if you don't have it sitting up perfectly. So, we decided early on that the vacuum sealer was going to be well worth the investment. It was another couple $1,000, and we were able to 10x our packaging, the way it looked, the way we were able to present it at the market.
Easier to sell.
Yep, easier to sell, so it was well worth it, and it makes processing day a lot cleaner and simpler as well.
Starting out with the shrink wrap bags is definitely an initial cost saver, but once you upgrade to a vacuum sealer, if you do, the bags are a lot cheaper, those vacuum seal bags. So over time, if you do enough birds, it kind of pays itself off just in the bags itself, because those shrink wrap bags are pretty expensive, per bird.
And the work is a lot more efficient
Yeah.
when you're packing and everything, so you're definitely saving time there.
Whether you're processing the birds yourself or not, you are going to need freezers. So for most people, that's going to look like chest freezers or stand-up freezers. Even us, we don't have a walk-in yet, but it's not completely necessary. For us, we needed about 80 cubic feet of freezer space. So that looked like about 6 mid-sized freezers to hold everything we needed to hold. To put it into perspective, one of our 16 cubic foot deep freezers will hold 2 tractors worth of chickens, So that's 150 birds if they're cut up, and then we'll need about 1.5 of those freezers if we're doing whole birds for 150 birds.
The amount of freezer space you're going to need also depends on how quickly you're going to be selling them. So obviously you don't want to be holding on to your product too long either way, but if you're selling your birds quick enough, you're going to be freeing up your freezer space quickly also, and maybe in time for your next processing date. So keep that in mind as well before you buy 2 or 3 extra freezers on top of what you got. So to cap the video off, there's one final cost here, and it's the cost of chickens and feed that you'll need to pay up front until you're able to start selling chicken and start bringing in some profit.
Most of the time you will need to order chicks at least a couple months in advance usually. Sometimes you can get away with less, but you never know what the availability of chicks is going to be. So you probably will need to order, depending on how many birds you're doing, the first batch or a few batches. So that is definitely a cost there. We found that per tractor, so per 75 birds, it cost about $175 in chicks. And then for feed, for us, it's about $470 per tractor, and that's using a non-GMO, locally sourced feed. Depending on how many birds you're doing, you may be able to buy in bulk, which means you get a better deal for your feed, but you'll definitely need to consider the feed cost for that first batch at least until you start making money to keep the business going.
So the number on the screen right now is what it cost us to start our chicken farm last year with 1,800 broilers on about 2.5 acres of land. As we've been saying, this is going to vary for everybody. If you're on a homestead scale, a big farm scale, it's going to depend. But that's just to give you a real life example and just put it into perspective. We're going to end off the video there. You can expect another video on how much you can make with a pastured broiler operation, and also another video on how you can sell all those pastured broilers. So we're excited for those to come out. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching.
All right.